Hello, good evening. The cladding scandal of 2017 is now, it would appear, the cladding scandal of 2021. Anyone assuming the tragedy at Grenfell would lead to a wholesale stripping of these flammable materials from people's homes is still waiting to see that happen. Today, in a Commons vote, Labour pushed the government to reveal the extent of the problem, fund the removal of the cladding and make sure the owners were not being charged extortionate costs for fixing their unsafe and unsellable houses. Our political editor, Nick Watt, is here to remind us, Nick, first, what this is all about.
Well, Boris Johnson said last week that the government will be making an announcement on how this is going to move this forward very shortly. And it looks to me, I'm told, that the government is prepared quite soon to put substantial extra sums on the table. It could possibly run into the billions. Now, I'm told that this will involve the taxpayer making a contribution. It's not yet done. It's still being discussed by number 10 and number 11 Downing Street. And the reason for that is it is not easy. Now, Christopher Pincher, who's the housing minister, he said in the House of Commons today, look, there are no quick fixes on this solution. He says it's highly complex because it involves many parties, leaseholders, developers, insurance industry and mortgage lenders. But I'm told that the government does want to have a lasting solution to this crisis, which, as you say, has left thousands of people in unsellable homes. It looks like the government wants to move reasonably soon. I think we're talking about weeks rather than days. But what they do need to do is they do need to come up with an announcement before the fire safety bill comes back from the House of Lords, because if they don't do that, there will be a Conservative rebellion and they will put these measures into the building safety bill, and that has to be wrapped up before the end of this current parliamentary session, which is in May. So look, we had that terrible tragedy at Grenfell Tower just after the general election in 2017, and that has led to massive financial difficulties, and that is what I've been looking at today.
Your home is supposed to be your safe haven, where you can shut the door behind you and leave your worries outside. That doesn't apply to us anymore.
I have nightmares sometimes. I wake up 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and I say, God, where am I, you know? I don't know where I'm going, what I'm going to do. The worrying thing is I may be homeless.
The human toll of living in a blighted home. Nearly 4 years on from the Grenfell tragedy, and hundreds of thousands of people are marooned in unsellable properties. It was combustible exterior cladding on Grenfell Tower that allowed the flames to spread, leading to 72 deaths. But flats up and down the country are still wrapped in potentially combustible cladding. There are reportedly 700,000 people in homes seen as dangerous, and as many as 3 million people in flats they cannot sell. The government says that all high-rise social housing with unsafe Grenfell cladding, that is aluminium composite material, has been or is in the process of having its cladding replaced. There is also a £1.6 billion fund to replace that cladding or other unsafe cladding in leasehold properties over 18 metres. The cladding here in East London is not the same as that used in Grenfell, and the developers Barratt's say they followed all regulations at the time of construction. But residents say that crippling bills for repair will fall on their shoulders.
I don't feel safe putting my son to sleep in my flat at night. You know, we could have a fire go off at any time and we are not protected. And then we have the financial worry on a monthly basis, because it's almost impossible to keep up with the service charge increases. On top of that, you have the end bill, which we know is coming because the buildings can't be fixed unless the money is put up.
I can't move because it's worthless. Nobody wants to buy a place like this, you know? So what do I do? I have to just sit out and wait, you know, for someone, the government, someone, Barratt's, you know, to do all the remedial works.
The devastating impact of never-ending costs to remain in a home you cannot sell is being heard loud and clear across our political system. The government says it is listening and it is acting. Labour says it's not moving far or fast enough.
I think 3.5 years after Grenfell, most people would assume that the cladding issue had been sorted out and that nobody's living in unsafe accommodation. That's not the case here and for millions of other people.
The concerns were voiced by backbench Conservative MPs during a House of Commons debate called by Labour.
Bob Blackman.
3.5 years after the Grenfell tragedy, we are in a position whereby we still now have leaseholders living in unsaleable, unmortgageable, uninsurable, unsafe properties. And that is a disgrace that we have to put right.
We have to be very clear that leaseholders do not have to pay. The government has to provide a safety net. It has to step in and it has to help leaseholders through this area.
The government says it has always taken the issue seriously.
And no one should ever feel unsafe in high-rise homes as a result of contractor error or malpractice. That is what the government is determined to achieve. And we've taken concrete steps not only to hold those responsible to account, but also to fix problems that have come to light as effectively and as quickly as we can.
One of Britain's greatest peacetime disasters is still casting a shadow as anxious homeowners look for help. The government says it is closing in on a lasting solution.
Nick, what there? Well, Barratt Homes, who developed the property seen in that piece, told Newsnight the building was signed off by an independent approved inspector as meeting the requirements of building regulations at the time of construction in 2003. We're sorry to hear of all the difficulties facing leaseholders. We have a meeting arranged with them this week. Well, as you can imagine, we did ask the government to discuss this with us, but they declined. Joining us now, the Labour MP Mike Amesbury, the Shadow Housing Minister, that was Malcolm Tarling from the Association of British Insurers, and Hana Imaan, a leaseholder in Birmingham whose block of flats contains cladding similar to the type which caused the fire at Grenfell. And if I can start with you, Hana, just to talk us through your own situation. You're an NHS worker, so I'm sure there is an awful lot on your shoulders right now. But tell us what this has done to how you live and what it's cost you.
Yeah, I mean, financially, it's crippling. It's I'm not even sure where to begin. So I moved in sort of 13 years ago. I purchased 25% share of my property to begin with, staircased up to 100% quite quickly, and then sort of spent a number of years trying to pay off the mortgage in my 30s, trying to do the right thing. So that we can move into a bigger place and sort of save some more money, so that we can have a garden and stuff for my little one, and we can do a bit better. I'm also one of the directors of the Right to Manage here for the block. So there's an awful lot on our shoulders personally, because we're not only having to live with the consequences, we're having to make the difficult decisions on behalf of leaseholders as well. I mean, the stress of it is phenomenal. Finances I can't even begin to sort of talk about that. So back in 2019, our service charge rose from what was approximately $1,500 a year, which is quite reasonable for a block like this, and then it sort of went up about £1,000, which was sort of just about bearable. And then last year it was sort of an increase up to 6,000, so that's an extra 500 a month. Yeah. This year it's very similar. And then obviously we've had to budget for the forthcoming removal of the cladding as well, which for myself, just for that, it's looking at about £52,000. Oh we're still waiting for a decision in terms of whether or not we're entitled to the government fund. And if we are, how much? So how much of that £52,000 am I going to be liable for? I mean, earlier, sort of later last year, I was made redundant, and I kind of knew that 12 months before I knew it was coming. But obviously, I didn't know that these costs were going to come upon me. And I'm literally spending everything that I've got to try and fix something that isn't our fault. I mean, they're categoric failings of sort of, and I will say government regulation. I mean, it's changed. There was all sorts of buildings that are wrapped in flammable cladding, which was allowed. Insurance companies don't want to know. We've had the increase in bills currently is due to the waking watch that we've got. So we've got 2 people that patrol the building 24 hours. And then insurance companies are holding us to ransom as well. So whereas our building insurance was sort of 45,000-ish, it's now sort of 500,000. It's phenomenal, and we still don't know where we're going.
Hannah, let me pick up with Malcolm Tarling there, because he can speak for the insurance agency. You've heard those words from Hannah, Malcolm. Insurance companies don't want to know, they're holding us to ransom, and the sums sound astronomical, going from 45,000 to 500,000 for the building.
Well, clearly there are still too many people in Hannah's situation stuck in unsafe properties which they can't sell and faced with significantly higher insurance bills. No insurance company wants to saddle leaseholders with significantly higher insurance bills, but the reality is that insurance is priced on risk, and until we speed up the removal of combustible cladding from buildings, and this is at the heart of the issue, these costs are going to continue. And we are the first to say that it's unacceptable, and we've been lobbying for some time, and it predates the Grenfell tragedy, that we do need to review and update building requirements in general. But what is needed now, as a matter of urgency, is to speed up the removal of combustible cladding. Because if you can make buildings that can be reflected in the costs of insurance.
But when you say it's unacceptable, you don't have to accept that. The insurance industry could make a special case for this, because we all know it's under review and it's changing.
Well, builders' insurance is designed and priced to cover damage caused to buildings. It's not designed or priced to pay for the cost of dangerous cladding. It's not designed or priced to make buildings safe. That is a responsibility of the constructors and the government working with them, so that we can actually resolve this issue. Insurance is a symptom of a problem. It's not the problem in itself. And I do appreciate that people like Hannah and millions of other leaseholders out there are faced with significantly higher insurance bills. We don't want to see that happen. And that's why we are continuing to say, let's get these buildings safe. Let's speed up the removal of this dangerous.
Can I just ask you, Malcolm, what would you do if you were in Hannah's position?
Will manage insurance costs.
What would you do if you were in Hannah's position? Or I mean, it could have happened absolutely to any of us. If that was your house or your property, what would you be doing now?
Absolutely. I think what's important for leaseholders to do is to talk to the buildings owners to make sure they are looking in the market, working with the insurance brokers who normally arrange this cover, doing everything they possibly can in the market to see if there are alternative options out there. For example, if you're a buildings owner, you may have other properties in your portfolio, you may be able to cross-subsidise the insurance costs. Some insurers may be able to take on a risk collectively, so that they're spreading the risk that otherwise one insurer alone would be unable to take on. But it comes back to what I said at the beginning. Yeah. The answer here is to speed up the removal of dangerous cladding so that residents get the security and the peace of mind they need, and also they're not saddled with significantly higher insurance costs, which no one.
Let me ask Mike Amesbury for Labour. We heard from Nick Watt tonight that the government is moving on this. He thinks by May. Do you accept your job is done now? There is cross-party consensus. Things will change.
Look, our job isn't done. Tonight, obviously, the opposition laid a motion to turbocharge the whole process. It was an opportunity for all parliamentarians, for the government to change direction. Actually, Malcolm was referring there to speeding up the process. That's exactly what we need. We need a national task force now with a laser-like focus, turbocharge, to actually relentlessly pursue those responsible for this cladding nightmare, for this whole mess. And the way to do that is to provide funding up front and then recover that polluter pays type approach. That's what needs to happen. That's what happened in Australia, in the state of Victoria. That's the approach we need.
Even though, as we know, this material was legal when it was first used, are you really going to chase the companies for doing what was within the law at the time they did it?
Look, your programme has certainly followed the Grenfell inquiry very, very closely. And you have recorded and reported, rightfully so, there are companies that have engineered test results to ensure that those products got through a process. When we talk about the polluter pays, there are a number of people responsible for this mess that they must be held account. But the way to deal with this at speed is through a national task force, paying up front and then recovering. And I say there that polluter pays approach to things. There's legislation coming down the line which need to strengthen. And of course, if the government finally gets things in the right direction, whether that's with the fire safety bill or the building safety bill, of course, they will naturally get the opposition support, but we will be challenging them every step of the way.
So
over 3.5 years now since Grenfell, when 72 people lost their lives, we've still got hundreds of thousands of people trapped in flats in the midst of pandemic, and flammable materials, inappropriate insulation, fire breaks missing. It's just it's chaos.
So
really
Mike, can I ask you, is Malcolm Tarling right then to say you can't knock insurance premiums down whilst the risk is still that great? You wouldn't be putting any pressure on the insurance industry to bring down their costs then? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what I would say to Malcolm, you referred to risk there, and certainly flammable buildings and cladding is a risk. But if we look at the case of in Birmingham, Brindley Place, 1,300%. In the case of Runcorn, neighbouring to my constituency, 1,000% in Cheshire. The government needs to get around the table with the Association of British Insurers and actually, let's seriously look at the market there.
There is a risk, Malcolm, that it looks like the industry is capitalising on risks that these residents have not taken.
Absolutely not. The last thing the insurance industry wants to do is to be seen as capitalising on people's trauma, on people's distress, on people's understandable concerns that they're living in properties that are dangerous, significantly more at risk of fire, and faced with significantly higher insurance premiums in some cases. That's why we'll speak to everybody and anybody to get this resolved as quickly as possible. But really, it comes back to, as I said at the beginning, we need to see a speeding up of the removal of dangerous cladding. That's what it's all about, and that's where I think everybody's energy should be focused.
Hannah, briefly to you, is there anything you've heard this evening that's reassured you?
No, not at all. There's nothing in the last sort of few years that has reassured me. In fact, that the stress gets worse, and the sort of unanswered questions and where we're left in limbo, that there isn't actually anything that's reassured me.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us this evening.